Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Nose in the Book, a Bible reading commentary with me, your host, Pastor Justin Van Reed. Got some really exciting, great chapters from God's Word before us today. So I hope you are excited about these readings and looking forward to this discussion. Again, as I said before, if there's any verse or question that you have that you would like some comments on and that I don't address, please feel free to put those in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer those. Otherwise, let's take a look what we have here from Genesis chapter 32, and then Esther chapter 8, Mark chapter 3, and Romans chapter 3. All right, lots going on here. Back to Genesis chapter 32. Jacob is on his way home, and he recognizes that Esau is going to be there, and when he left, Esau was very angry with him, and so he does two things here. One is he prays and asks God, in essence, to protect him. And then two, he sends a series of gifts, or at least at this point, he prepares a series of gifts so that as Esau comes out to meet Jacob, instead of being greeted by Jacob, he's going to be greeted by a whole bunch of gifts. Here you go, Esau. And then another selection of gifts. So as Esau works his way to Jacob, he's just going to have received so much from Jacob's hand. And they're going to tell him, this is from Jacob. He's coming behind us. This is from Jacob. And Jacob's doing all of this to hopefully appease, as he says even there in the chapter, to appease Esau so that he won't be angry and will welcome him. Their relationship dynamic is quite interesting here. Even in the next chapters, we observe their meeting, and it seems as though things are better, but not really fully better. But interesting action here by Jacob. Pray, and then also he plans out here a strategy for appeasing Esau. Does that show doubt? Maybe. You could look at it that way for sure, to say, couldn't Jacob just trust that the Lord was going to fulfill his word to him and protect him? Why did he have to use this little sneaky strategy? But again, that's the story of Jacob's life. Second half of the chapter, you have the great scene where Jacob wrestles with God. It's an angel of the Lord who also is called God himself, and it's very mysterious here, because it seems like Jacob is actually winning the fight, and so then the angel just merely touches him, and so then he's kind of has to submit, and but then he recognizes that he has wrestled with the Lord. And it's a great scene because, as many have pointed out, it seems to be the story of Jacob's life, striving with God, wrestling with God. And so an interesting picture there of Jacob's relationship with his God. Picking up in Esther chapter 8. Now we've come past Haman, and Haman himself has been dealt with. But what about the plot to kill all of the Jews? So there's a problem here, because when the Medes and Persians issued a decree, it was irrevocable, right? It wasn't like they could just issue another law that says, in essence, the first law that I sent, don't follow that, or that one doesn't count, right? Their decrees were irrevocable. And so Esther comes and says, to the king, you got it. It's not enough just to kill Haman. The decree is still out there to annihilate the Jews. How are we going to save the Jews? What are we going to do about this? And so Xerxes comes up with this alternative, this plan here. He says to Esther, you and Mordecai get together, decree whatever you have to decree. Remember, though, that what I've said, and it's unchanging, but send it out with my authority. So come up with an answer, in essence, yourselves, but you have my backing, you have my authority. And so Mordecai and Esther get together, and they send out this letter to all the provinces, all the rulers throughout Persia, throughout the kingdom. And basically it doesn't say, don't listen to the previous decree. What it says is, on that day when all of the, when it's been declared to kill all of the Jews have a right to fight back. Okay, so this is going to cause everybody to kind of think twice here. So interesting. So now you have kind of two parallel decrees butting up against each other. And so we'll see the outcome of these things in the final 2 chapters of Esther. But again, I think the overall point, don't miss it, for the book of Esther is the sovereign work of God, even though it's mysterious, behind the scenes, not overt. His name's not mentioned, but clearly God is orchestrating things out here, as we see throughout the life of Esther and Mordecai. All right, turning then to the New Testament, Mark chapter 3. And just a brief comment I want to make here. Again, it's more things, Jesus, as we're going through Mark, we're running through from event to event, some more interaction with the Pharisees. But what really comes through in this chapter for me is the interaction of Jesus and his disciples, and this idea of Jesus's disciples, a smaller group. Because here in the chapter, and also a number of times in Jesus' ministry, you have crowds that are coming to follow Jesus, just crowds and crowds of people. But Jesus doesn't go after the crowds primarily. Sure, he speaks to them. Yes, he heals lots of diseases. He has compassion on the crowds, we read several times. And clearly Jesus cares for these people and wants to do good for them. But what he spends the most of his time on, where his real focus is on his teaching and passing on all that the Father has given him, is to this small group that he has called out. So rather than going to the masses and the crowds, and today we may think that's where it's at, right? Bring a big crowd together and do the work through many. Jesus decides, no, it's going to be in the hands of a few. And you can even see this at the end of the chapter, where it says, that his family has come, and he says, who is really my family? And let me read it. He says, who is my mother and who are my brothers? Then looked around at those with him and said, these are my mother and brothers. Anyone who does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. That's what Jesus is after, right? Those who are following his way, following his will. He says, this is my family. And so Jesus here in this chapter, they're listed out the 12 disciples, right? His family, those who do the will of God. All right. Then lastly, we have Romans chapter 3. And here's, in essence, is the summary of Paul's argument to this point of how all are guilty of sin. He already made the point in chapter 1 that the Gentiles are guilty. Even into the beginning of chapter 2, continued to make that point. Gentiles cannot say that they have an excuse, that they shouldn't be judged. He says that what was known about God was evident in creation, chapter 1, beginning of verse 18. And then they rejected it, they suppressed the truth, but they also, beginning of chapter 2, they've had their conscience that shows them, that testifies against them when they do right and wrong. So they know what's right, they should have done what was right, but instead they haven't. They've sinned. Jewish people, he says, they have the law. Clearly, they don't follow the law. They don't keep the law. They teach others to do the law, but they don't do it themselves. And so they're guilty as well. So you have everybody who's guilty. This is what he gets to in chapter 3. And it's a very powerful statement, right? Who is righteous? There is none. No, not one. And he goes through here how everyone is guilty, right? All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All have sinned. And so here he's building this case as we go through the book here, and we come to the conclusion here in the first 3 chapters of the fact that all are sinners, utterly depraved, as he says there. That's just evil continually. I think of what we read earlier in Genesis, way back in the time of Noah, where God says that the hearts of man are evil only continually. And Paul points that out here in Romans chapter 3, that we are utterly sinful. And so everything that happens by the grace of God and just through believing in him. There's no amount of activity we could do, because if it was up to our activity, we would fail. And because God is a holy God, he requires that perfection, and we obviously come way short of that. So we've got a major problem here. We're guilty of sin, and God is a holy God. But that's why Jesus Christ came, to pay the price for our sin, so that all of our sin gets transferred to his account and his righteousness to our account. And so we are, because of Jesus, only because of Jesus, we are not guilty of our sin. I hope you know him. I hope you trust him. I hope you believe in him. All right, that's all we have time for today. Again, that was Genesis 32, Esther chapter 8, Mark 3, and Romans 3. I hope to see you again soon. Until then, keep your eyes on the Lord and your nose in the book. See you again.